around us, whether it is driving economic growth, ensuring social justice, or strengthening governance systems. Yet, public policies, though it has a huge impact in our lives, the education of public policy often doesn't get the attention that it deserves. Today, we are lucky to have with us someone who has not just championed policy education, but also led some of India's top universities. Professor Dr. Gopa Kumar brings decades of experience in academia and governance, giving him a unique perspective on why learning about public policy is not just an important thing, but also an urgent action. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Namaskar. Yeah.
So I'll start with a basic question.
Yes.
Why do you think public policy education is crucial in today's world? And why is it that it's not a mainstream subject in any universities? So, still, most of the universities focus on these traditional disciplines like engineering, medicine, and business. While if we see public policy, it's either an afterthought or it's confined to some elite institutions. So, why do you think public policy education needs to be mainstream in academics?
Very well. At the outset, I can say that public policy studies are so crucial in the contemporary period, which would facilitate the strengthening of democracy, the quality of governance, and the extent of public participation in democratic development. We are still a young democracy, although we are 75 years old since we had implemented the Constitution. Our experiments, our experience in democracy, our initiatives in democracy, these are all relatively young compared to Western democracies, where they developed a kind of a strong civil society prior to the arrival of democracy. So civil society growth preceded democracy, and democracy was the icing on the cake. For us, it is the other way. We are bringing democracy first and then trying to transform a deeply traditional society into a modern one. So we are not very experienced in the dimensions of democracy. We inherited the colonial legacies, particularly in public administration also. Although we have great scholars, including Dr. Paul Appleby, who was hired by Nehru to give a strong framework for public administration, there exists a great divide between administration and the actual political process. This is also reflected in the electoral process, the nature and qualifications of the legislators, MLAs, MPs, Panchayat members, and certainly the people for whom the governance is expected to be. On the other hand, you have a highly talented meritocratic bureaucracy. And of course, with the positive discrimination, reservation policies also come. But in every sense, there is a wide gap between public administration and the government. Over the period of time, we are improving. Definitely, we are improving. I hold the opinion that civil society has a long way to go. It is strong in urban areas, but not in every part of the country. We need to go a very, very long way in strengthening the quality of democracy and civil society. So therefore, public policy which would help the people to benefit from the policies in action, which would change their standard of living, whether it respect to health, housing, education, infrastructure, agriculture, or any sort of thing. These are the areas where policies have to be properly formulated. In our context, most of the time, there is an emotional content in lawmaking. Either we refuse to make the law, or we delay in making the law, or we make a law with great emotion and carry with a lot of problems in it. So imperfections in public policy, timing is also slow, and also the kind of investment, the kind of money allotted for implementing such policies, and the other kinds of aspects that are required for public policies. Unfortunately, the bureaucrats are not very well focused on that, and they work mostly under compulsions, particularly the command given by the political leadership. And then they try to change the system. And as Nehru said, that he wanted to be known as the first servant of the people, not as the Prime Minister of India. And there is a big difference between the actual political process and the kind of electoral process and the leadership that are being generated, whether it is political leadership or the administrative leadership. I don't say that things have not changed. There are a lot of changes, and people from the ordinary realm are also getting elected. But legislators also need training. MLAs and MPs also need training, like the babus or the bureaucrats. So together, we need to strengthen our democracy, for which public policy education is extremely important, because public policies are different from conventional ideologies. Ideologies are in a way abstract and has a loose framework. But when it comes to the actual implementation of public policy, many factors have to be taken into consideration. For example, the terrain, the ecosystem, the environment, the kinds of people who are going to be benefited, what are the timings for this, who constitute the target groups, what are the goals in achieving these. So a lot of aspects have to be considered, and public policy steps are also very important as basic elements of public policy. We know very well the formulation stage is very important. The implementation stage is important. The evaluation stage is important. The coordination stage is important. The feedback stage is important. So a lot of things are connected with public policy, and we have many problems, as one may reflect that, for instance, one of the public policies that failed in India in the early part was the land reform. Land reform is now a state subject, but in many states, successful land reform policies were not implemented because the proper experience in implementing public policies were not properly understood, either by the bureaucrats or by the political elites, or both. For instance, if I give a simple example, why did people give unused lands or lands with a lot of litigation or areas which are rocky in nature as free lands when Vinoba Bhave conducted a survey and also a volunteering visit to all the zamindars to provide them free land? And secondly, on the land reform itself, we have problems. How to measure the surplus land? Which are the areas that have to be properly cultivated? These things need a lot of exposure. Kerala, for example, a state where land reforms were successfully implemented, also had a lot of problems. For instance, we covered in Kerala, we covered the plain land, but did not go to the mountains or estates. Then the justification from the part of the Communist Party, who were instrumental in implementing land reform, was that if you implement land reforms in tea estates and the coffee estates and other plantations, land will be disaggregated, and as a result of which all the workers will lose their jobs and there is no replacement of jobs. So let them continue there, for instance. But today you look back and see there are real estate managers have taken over it, those estate mountains and other places, and converted into tourism purposes without any control, and a new kind of a new feudalistic culture has developed. Now, this is mainly because we need to look at public policies both from the macro perspective as well as from the micro perspective. This has not happened, and therefore, public policy education, training are all required to the stakeholders. And these stakeholders include political elites, administrative elites, ordinary people, non-governmental organizations, think tanks, and many other aspects. So it is so useful, and a proper understanding of shaping public policy, the idea of public policy, formulating it, and stage by stage how it can be properly addressed and to what extent this can be realized practically. I think each of these aspects have to be taken into consideration, and a collective decision has to come. As of now, unfortunately, the bureaucrats plan the public policy, without much preparation. When they are asked to do that, they do it suddenly based upon certain training that they have received. In my opinion, bureaucrats are to be trained in public policies and they should be regularly trained, not only induction training, but they need training on many areas. Just imagine a new policy on artificial intelligence. What's our background? India is set to come out with a policy framework, an architecture for artificial intelligence, whereas United States and China had already gone a large level. They are very ahead of all of us. So are the bureaucrats really capable of understanding this? How do they formulate this policy? Do they consult the digital world? To what extent? We are not aware of all these things. So I think we should make this more transparent and also make it more direct, for which regular training is required. And for example, we have the Indian Institute of Public Administration, Delhi. We have also training centers in many parts. In Kerala, we have the Institute of Management in government. All these training institutes should be regularly given updates and revise their curriculum so that they will come on terms with the new public policy. Because public policy is not a static thing. It's highly interdisciplinary. It is moving, it is changing from time to time depending upon the location. So we cannot simply emulate a public policy from the West. We have to do it given our own condition and the context in which it is being done. Otherwise, what will happen if I give a simple example? If you visit some flower garden, particularly whether you visit Shimla or you visit Ooty in Tamil Nadu, and where there are nurseries of wonderful plants and other flower beds are there. You collect them and bring home. Unless you make the environment properly for the cultivation and for the proper nurturing of these plants will go astray and they'll be degenerating. Because the environment is very important. And how do you make the environment is very important. So preparation and pre-preparation for public policy is also highly important. Unfortunately, I must say, with whatever limitation we have achieved, we did not get the real time. For example, when Nehru, again, as the first prime minister, he was asked, what are your priorities? He spoke very much about industrial development, agricultural development, and so many other things, including foreign policy, which has been one of his important strong area. Somebody raised a question, how about education? His immediate reaction was, well, we cannot wait. Education, we cannot wait. So the point is that we are compelled to do a lot of public policies covering a large area, and thereby it has become almost the sole responsibility of the bureaucrats to supply with public policy suddenly. But that was in 1947. Things have changed. India has improved in education, in ecosystem, in infrastructure. So we can get a lot of support system from different parts, and then only we can utilize it in the proper way. Unfortunately, we have not reached anywhere there. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So I liked how you talked about the when the policy gets formulated, we see that often engineers, like these professionals from diverse fields, like engineers drafting digital policies, economists shaping social programs, corporate leaders influencing public governance. So, though we like to have interdisciplinary perspectives in policy education, do you think the absence of any formally trained policy professional in key decision making role that leads to a flawed policy making?
I
Because
would, yeah.
yeah, I would like if you could give some example of that also.
Yeah. I would fully agree with you on the point that the paucity of trained professionals in public policies affect the formulation of public policies. It affects the implementation of public policy. It affects the evaluation of public policies. It affects the monitoring of public policies. Let us say, first of all, public policy studies are interdisciplinary in nature. It is not a discipline limited to social sciences, although a lot of administrative dimensions are brought in, like public administration, management, political science, economic dimensions. So those social factors are there. Nevertheless, the public policy studies are interdisciplinary in nature because we have to do and initiate public policies that would help the people to improve their lives, improve their economic conditions. Secondly, enable the government to address the challenges that they are facing. So this is a skill job. At the same time, highly interdisciplinary in character. Of course, engineers are good in developing a policy related to industrial development, construction sector, manufacturing sector. We don't dispute that. Digital knowledge is highly important for creating a public policy on artificial intelligence or the policies that we have created on many dimensions like Right to Information Act or even our own public policies relating to cyber policy, etc. So when you draft these things, the expertise of those people are important. But who provides the framework? I think that is where the professionals of public policies are important because they can start it from either from a general perspective to particular perspective or the other way because they know ultimately that these are things are which cannot be bound up in a theoretical sense and it has a ground reality and how when these things are implemented how the society will respond to it is important and the stakeholders as we know are many but three factors are important: government's leadership, economic transformation following such changes, and thirdly, the market conditions. I will recall, for instance, in the past, our foreign policies were mostly concerned about defense and security. Defense and national security. You look today, how drastically different it is. For example, trade, diaspora, business, and many other issues like commerce. So most of the international developments are to be connected. Unlike in the past, we were bothered mostly about how the national security of a country can be retained and how best we can do it in the form of defense structure, etc. But the whole scope of foreign policy has changed. We do more policies to improve our economic lives. We do it also because diaspora is a huge number of people who are settled elsewhere, Indian diaspora. And again, immigrants are moving and we have to face legal immigrants, illegal immigrants. So on all these areas and sub areas, we need public policies. So how to develop? So policy dimension itself is changing and therefore these things cannot be simply visualized by, say, for example, an engineer or a person who is well versed in commerce. So we need to understand this and therefore policy professionals are to be hired by the government. Unfortunately, this is not happening in nowadays, or even in the past, it is not happening because the government for a long time over depended on the bureaucracy because that was the only strong arm where you can expect some permanency. I'm not reducing or discounting the scope of administration. As Sardar Patel, soon after independence, said, he cannot disarm or dissolve the Indian bureaucracy, which were recruited by the Britishers. What we need is to train them and orient them properly. And then he said, I quote, remove them, I find a great vacuum, unquote. So this is what he said because the continuity has to be provided and this continuity can be provided only when there is a structure. So that structure we inherited. But afterwards, we changed from colonial bureaucracy to post-colonial bureaucracy and from post-colonial bureaucracy to development functionaries. So roles are changing, no doubt about that. But look at our administrative part. To my mind, one major limitation is that, unlike in France or Japan, our administrators are not giving specialized training. They are bound to be generalists all over their life, although they work in 30, 35 departments in their career, spanning from, say, for example, if they join at the age of 25 or 26, retire at 60, they may work on an average of spending 1 to 2 years in every department. But this will not help them. They are not specializing in one area. They are moving in so many areas. And ultimately, they are not able to identify a particular area where they have done a contribution. France and Japan, where the administrators, after successful conversation and a rigorous training, they will be allotted either on their request or based upon their performance, an area where they can do very well. And then they can climb up the ladder to the extent to which they are extremely careful, cautious, at the same time dynamic in performance. Here, you don't matter whether you work in agriculture department, the industries department, or training department, or commerce department, or foreign affairs. All these are passing through, but ultimately he is not becoming a master of anything because he's become over generalized. So this is the problem with our public policy, lack of public policy professionals. And these babus or bureaucrats come from that direction, and they are expected to draft a public policy. They may pass on the file to the lower officials, and they may, in consultation with the legal section of the secretariat, may draft a policy within a framework which they are familiar. And usually those things are stereotyped. Every time you get a stereotyping in this drafting, and there is no expertise or look at this level. So what is required is that even when a policy is to be drafted, a pre-discussion is very important. And that is where I think public policy professionals can contribute a lot. And even the policy, when it is drafted finally or formulated finally, before it is presented before the parliament or legislature, I think the touch of public policy professionals are very important. And even when some of the MPs or MLAs demand for impracticable things in the floor of the house where they are expected to do in a democracy, if it is not possible within the realm and also impossible because of the poor logistics, I think these aspects have to be responded, for which ministers also need an exposure from the public policy professionals. And after all, we know many of our ministers are not specialists. They are there by political support. And of course, they may be sincere, but they need strong support, not only from the bureaucrats, but also from public policy professionals. They are not consulted at any point of time, and public policy professionals just move out of, are hired even for a short time. But my point is that no, they must be there for a longer time, and therefore their services are most important. And it is here, for example, the bureaucrats advise the political executive, and political executive become humble, so humble that they have to accept everything that bureaucracy says. Unfortunately, this is the reality, and the lack or the paucity of professionals, public policy professionals, seriously harm the implementation part. So when it comes to the implementation part, not even 50% of the scope has been achieved. So you have to get a feedback, and new public policies become important. So before a policy is to be drafted, the logistics, the economic aspect, the cost effectiveness, the terrain, the environment, the ecosystem, all these aspects have to be properly understood. The clerk sitting in the lower division, at the lower level, may not be able to understand all these things. So he begins from the experience of the previous file and the previous policy, and draft a structure for which more ideas are given by the higher level bureaucracy. Now, this is actually happening, and therefore there's a big problem. And I would say that this affects the drafting stage and implementing stage. So it's going to be very important. And at all these levels, unless the advice of the policy professionals are given, what will happen is the outcome will be poor, and some of the policies become failures. Actually, despite the money invested and the time that has been spent, it becomes failure because the target orientation, the goal orientation, etc., are not followed. So therefore, the policy touch is important at every level, from A to Z. It is important, and that is where I think hiring public policy professionals becomes extremely important. But it should start from the beginning. Once the manifestos are submitted, I would even recommend political parties, when they draft manifestos, should consult public policy professionals. This is what we understand as interest aggregation. Because a policy which is lofty but impossible things. Say, for example, a state government claims, we will provide jobs to the tune of 5 lakhs in 1 year. They can declare it as a manifesto. But when it comes to implementation, they can't even provide 1,000 people in 1 year. So the criticism will automatically come. So what is expected is that the public policy professionals should be consulted even before election manifestos are implemented. You should not go to the election manifestos just after vote banks and imagine that these will convert into votes. You can do that, but you cannot fool the people all the time. So public policy experts are to be consulted even for preparing election manifestos, and the logistics of such manifestos, such policies are to be advised to the political leadership prior to the manifesto finalization. Similarly, in the case of implementing the policy, because the government got a mandate, they will look at their mandate, look at their manifesto. They said, well, this is committed. Okay, do that. If you are committed, why didn't you do that? But again, you need the support of the policy profession. So actually, these are lacuna, these are things which you find a lot of gaps in it, and therefore the result is either the policy becomes a failure or there's a poor outcome. This is the reality. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Now that you have mentioned additional opportunities and scopes for public policy professionals uh, who, let's say, get trained in through the Indian academia.
Correct.
Now, however, there is always a possible question on the accessibility of public policy education. How do students who come from from a different socio-economic and regional backgrounds, how do they break this ivory tower of a public policy education that is most often perceived as elitist, available mostly to students from privileged backgrounds with access to, let's say, global institutions, global networks? How do we make the public policy education inclusive, representative of diverse voices, and also a lot more democratic?
Yes, you are right that very few institutions offer public policy courses. That's a tragedy compared to the Western countries, where I've seen not only undergraduate programs, postgraduate programs, MA in public policy studies. So these are programs that are in force in many Western societies, even in the South Australian universities, New Zealand. They are also offering excellent courses on public policies, and that kind of a professionalism has not come in our academic background. That is the first limitation. And as you raised earlier, one of our problem is that people look at the job availability, and in their visibility, they will look at it and say, okay, engineering, medicine, and then they go for management. Okay, these are the immediate attraction for any student in the present society. Our problem, see, we are transforming to become a soft power for future. Earlier, we started with as an agrarian society. I remember a time when even in the educational system, agriculture BSc was a very soft course. And I remember a minister even declaring in public through the media several decades ago, if there is any agriculture graduate, please come to me. I can straight away give you a job. So that was a situation in the past. But now we are changing from an agrarian society to a modern society. We have industrial development, we have manufacturing now, we have construction development. There are also service sector is so huge. And in some of these areas, it becomes difficult to understand where is service sector, where is industry. They are collaborative in nature, they have an intermingling nature. So the job opportunities in this country are changing. Not only because India is changing, the world itself is changing. So we have to grasp with such developments. And when it comes to such development, say for instance, after 1991, MBA courses became very popular. Even earlier, MBA courses were there on a very small level because private sector was not appreciated in the earlier part of the life. And therefore, companies hired only postgraduates or graduates, and they looked at their managerial ability based upon their performance. But things have changed prior to 1991 also, looking for MBA graduates. But not many universities were giving postgraduate program in MBAs. But after 1991, when we implemented liberalization, privatization, globalization, suddenly there was a spark, so this growth in the studies of management. And different kinds of management courses got attraction, like industrial relations, marketing, business, operations. So like that, new and new courses have started because India was moving from an agrarian society towards a capitalist society, and there it required a lot of changes. So management became very important under such discipline, assuming that both accountancy, commerce, chartered accountancy, management, all these are going to be of high demand. Well, these things, we accept that reality is also there at the global level. So conventionally, people look at immediate job opportunities. Well, this is one major dimension. But when it comes to the practical side of it, that is where you have to see how the bureaucracy in India, for instance, look at policy development or even their administration from a regulatory angle. Because they're trying to implement the rule of law and they are expected to see things from a regulatory nature. So they control it. They do have the power. I'm not discounting or denigrating, but they are doing a very good job. But in the process, it is more of a regulation and rather than bringing it from a development angle. And that is where implementation part becomes important. You raise the question why it is not so popular as you expected. Well, very few universities have public administration courses as of now. That is another point. And public administration courses also require a lot of updating in their syllabus. And that is where public policy courses are to be framed and updated. So honestly, I feel that there is a shortage of public policy professionals in this country. As we agreed in the earlier part of the discussion, in the contemporary world, democracy requires so much, and the people require so much from their government, and therefore, from cradle to grave, every aspect of our life ought to be properly nourished, for which concurrent policies and futuristic policies are to be framed. And that kind of training ought to be given because it may be related to agriculture, water management, housing, health, or infrastructure development. So it may range from one area to another and new areas on digital development. So many of the new areas that are catching and developing. So these things, when developments have to be caught up, we need scholars who can specialize in these areas. Say, public policy professionals in agriculture, public policy professionals in digital development or artificial intelligence, public policy professionals in health area, health development. So like that, we need specialized training of these public policies. And unfortunately, the academia as well as the political executives sitting at the top, they are not realizing the potentiality of these courses and how these courses can benefit the society. So I would recommend that even at the lower level, even in the school level, an introductory course on public policy should be there, either in social sciences or humanities areas, so that the students will get an idea, okay, there is a policy dimension. I never realized that. We are taught so much about administrative dimension. We're taught about regulatory dimension. What exactly is a policy? That initiation should come even at the school level, plus two level. And then when it comes to college, definitely an undergraduate course in public policy with focus on many areas can be given. So public policy is an interdisciplinary course, so you can bring anything. No problem, you can bring anything, but it must have a policy prescription. And that policy suggestion is to be highlighted. And unfortunately, our government have not appreciated that, despite the reality that this country has more than 500,000 non-governmental organizations. So there is no shortage of think tanks, there is no shortage of political parties, there is no shortage of non-governmental organization, civil society organization. But the problem is that they are not properly trained or directed and their services are not properly utilized. I will give you one example that the Election Commission of India is very strong and have a strong administrative system. But can you believe that despite having our 75 years of experience in electoral politics, there are certain regional pockets, there are certain areas in hilly areas, in inaccessible areas, where voter registration has not been completed. So therefore, the service of the NGOs were required and the Election Commission sought their services, and as a result of which, more and more electoral rolls were prepared. So this means accessibility is a problem even for the government, despite having their regulatory power, police power, administrative power. So we need to develop public policies for which public policy training should start, and academia is the best area. So let us start at the school level in the form of an introductory course, maybe one chapter in the course on economics or political science. And then when it comes to the graduation level, there can be definitely a course or elective course or a regular course on public policy, which will be more useful to the students. And when it comes to the post-graduation level, they'll be able to specialize further. So as of now, you are right that there is a elitist character, and only those who aspire to do post-graduation, particularly in Western countries, would say, okay, I will do this. But the point is that just like management, public policies also have scope, and they will be hired in not only in government, they'll be hired in NGOs, they'll be hired in think tanks, they'll be hired in voluntary organization. So their services can be made available everywhere, and they can become policy advocates, what is called policy advocacy. So make them professional and connect it to the society, market, and government. All these three pillars are important. The governmental structure, the market structure, and the societal level, you find the development happening. So all these three areas where environment and economic progress are required, the suggestions of public policy approaches can be taken into account. Unfortunately, the scope is not properly understood. And therefore, as of now, people simply look, okay, India is going with heavy construction. So let us do engineering. India is now going digital development. So let us do a course on cyber security. So the immediate visibility is what is making. But the point is that government alone cannot do all these things. They need the services. And that is where policy training and exposure becomes very important. Thank you.
Sir, thank you. Sir, that takes me to this question on universities acting as policy incubators. So at IILM, we have a master's in public policy program where we have created a policy lab, a policy incubator. So that's like a collaborative space where our students come and they talk about real world challenges like policy challenges. There are the whole teaching, the pedagogy is very practical oriented, and they try to bridge the gap between what is taught in the class uh, as theory subjects and other subjects, and what are the gaps between this theory and the practical application, how to bridge it. So like a hub of policy innovation. So that's the idea of a policy incubator. And we see that countries like US universities, they have active role in shaping the government policies through either research or advocacy. But we see in India, this whole role of universities as policy incubators or universities as policy labs, this whole role kind of seems very underdeveloped. But you have led both state and central universities. So, what do you think, or that how universities in India can, can act to get more engaged in policy making in India?
Well, uh, one great idea would be that, as UGC also appreciated, in the Board of Studies, as well as in Academic Council, we must induct people with practical experience, whether from private companies or from non-governmental organizations, or some of them doing extraordinary work in agriculture, or some other areas where societal progress has been noted. So such people, even if they are not properly professionally trained, their voice must reflect in the curriculum preparation as well as in the academic council. Unfortunately, people like you and me lack practical training. See, what we do in central universities, for instance, we advise our teachers to visit the villages, to visit ordinary schools, and also visit hospitals, and further conduct some programs in public streets as well on issues like ragging, on controversial problems, so that public awareness become more important, and teachers and students are not expected to continue and their work in classrooms, in their very good atmosphere, air-conditioned halls with smart classrooms, etc. This is a real problem and a real challenge. So I have encouraged when I was heading the Central University of Kerala, advising my teachers, the faculty there, whether they're science faculty or whether they're social science faculty or even language faculty, you go there, I will give you duty leave. You spend time in the school. Give them motivation. Who knows, your inspiration will help develop a young Abdul Kalam sitting in the class. Who knows? Because very good students were motivated by teachers in their primary class. But you cannot address the classroom as if you are doing an MSc classroom. You have to do it on the level in which the students are expected. I said, I am doing that in the sense that whenever I am requested to attend a public meeting in the northern Malabar region, I never rejected that, irrespective of the fact whether the invitation has come from a village library, reading club, or town hall, local town hall, or school, or college, or NGO, etc. I never considered that. But what is important is that I will prepare what is expected from them, from me, and then speak and communicate in a language which ordinary people can understand. So our teachers should do that. And coming to the specific question you said, field work is important, practical knowledge is important, and therefore you go to the field. A botanist can prepare a directory of the plants in that particular region, but it needs time, it needs training. So you can send your students, you can also go spend the time and then collect information. Like that, a public administration student should visit the government offices or collectorate and see how the people are affected by the governmental actions. Collect their grievances, interview them, and understand. Sometimes the babus or the bureaucrats may not know many of the things. The ordinary folk will be able to tell you. So these are the real problems. But the officer sitting there is arguing something else, which has nothing to do with the reality. So the real life situation, the practical situation is very important. So what is expected is that our students and teachers should spend more time in the field, whether it is market, whether it is government offices, whether it is hospitals, whether it is a situation in the public field or agriculture area or cultivation area. Your presence is required and collect the feedback from there. And that kind of feedback will in turn help your syllabus preparation. So curriculum should contain not only theoretical facts, but also practical aspects. Such units should find its place, and so that students can be given credits based upon their work they do in the field. So somebody is spending, say, 2 weeks internship in a government office. Give them the credit. Like that, somebody is spending time in a hospital when an issue regarding improvement of infrastructure in health services required. If you have done some work and spent some time in the hospital, you can give the student that credit for him. So everything should not be in the form of an answer, in an answer sheet. So different types of evaluation can be conducted. But such things can be done only when you move out of your campus. Your field work becomes very important. And spending time in the field is extremely important. As a political scientist myself, I got a lot of information of Indian society and Indian political process, not only from the books I read, but also from what I gathered from the political system, from the people, from the reality, from the people, from the electorate. Discussing with them will give a lot of stories, and he or may be able to give you a lot of anecdotes and experiences which our books may not tell. So this fieldwork becomes very important, and case studies are important. So students should be asked to do case studies. They can also prepare projects. They can get training in drafting a public policy. So all these are not expected to be in a generalized form, but in a micro form. So what they learn, what they experience, let them come back and give a small note of, say, 5 pages. What did you learn? Give a note of 5 pages. And later I will give you a project work. Like that, this kind of fieldwork training is extremely important. Here is something that we should learn from the Western countries. For example, any course on economics or any course on public administration or any such courses, they collect lots of information from what is happening in the field. And that helps them to do further and changing the syllabus and syllabus revision should take place very frequently. You should not wait for 3 years or 2 years. My suggestion is that even after 1 year, some changes can be brought in the syllabus based upon the recommendation given by the faculty concerned and also by the non-faculty, I said in the board of studies or in the academic council. Their recommendations can also find its place. So as such, we can catch up with the time. In Indian academia, the problem is we have overemphasized on theory and therefore we became too abstract. We were ideologically committed. We were focused on certain emotional value, but ultimately the student who passes out such courses are not able to offer solutions. Public policy is a solution-oriented course also. So unless they come forward from what they learn from the society, prescription cannot be made possible. And this is the problem. Our administrators also have this problem because top-level administrators spend time only in their bureaus, and middle-level bureaus of officers, of course, they deal with the people, no doubt about that. Occasionally, they visit the field. But if they are given some training and advice and counseling by the public policy students, that also will facilitate better knowledge. So while I was there in Central University, I requested the collector of that district, Kasaragod district, to ensure that our public administration students spend at least 1 month in your office, in your collectorate, so that their training will give them a lot of exposure. And that helped the students. And they came back with more robustness, with more strength. They said, okay, we learned a lot from what is taught so far. So such exposure gives a big change. So academia has to be realistic with the field work because the world is changing so fast. So practical knowledge is extremely important. As of now, there is a shortage of connectivity between the two. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I'm jumping into the last question because we have less time and some questions are there in the inbox also from the audience. So my last question is, um, many students that I have come across, whether in their senior secondary education or undergraduation education, they're very passionate about making a change, making a difference in the society. But they're very unaware how public policy is that career path for them to make that change. So if you were speaking to a student from a small town who's eager to create change but unsure about studying public policy, what would you say?
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because you are focusing more on the students.
Yes. So it's like a message to the youth, to the next generation.
Sure.
So if you could also give some examples of some public policy professional that you know who have made a change or a transformative impact on the society. So we can, because a lot of youth get inspired by an image of a person who has brought in a change.
Well, this is a very introspective question also. But India is lucky that we have produced extraordinary leaders who came from the ordinary level. Let us start, say, for example, with Dr. Abdul Kalam or with leaders like Dr. Subramaniam in Tamil Nadu and Dr. Swaminathan, who was pivotal in ensuring the green revolution in the country, and also certain leaders who brought changes in public administration like the Ahmednagar experiment in 1982, etc. We are also familiar with the White Revolution leadership given by Dr. Varghese Kurian. Say, for example, I have given you the example of our president, former president, Dr. Abdul Kalam, who is so passionate with the youth, and the youth were also passionate about him, the kind of service he has done. And similarly, the White Revolution, where Dr. Varghese Kurian changed the whole cooperative sector in the dairying field. And similarly, the Green Revolution, which is championed initially by a political leader like Subramaniam, and of course, Indira Gandhi also supported it. But the real initiative has come from none other than Dr. Swaminathan, who established a foundation, a research foundation, which is still very active, and such people becoming role models for the future. So the point is that we are lucky that just like in sports, you have heroes. we have public heroes in many areas. And these public heroes came because of their exposure, the training, the kind of knowledge that they were able to achieve. Not like people who were born with silver spoon in their mouth. Ordinary people. Dr. Abdul Kalam was born in a fishing village in Rameshwaram. Dr. Varghese Kurian had a very humble background. And when he moved to Gujarat, and his initiative for setting up dairying, for which he used the powerful instrument called the cooperative sector, and how democratized the cooperative sector was in the process. Similarly, by inventing new kinds of seeds and fertilizers, how our agriculture production can be achieved. Look, today, after the successful revolution, green revolution, when India got independence, more than 75% of the people were dependent on agriculture. Today, it has reduced to 51%. It will come down. I would say that it should come down to 10 or 20% because we need only limited people to be engaged in agriculture because we have the machinery, we have the technology, we have the fertilizer, we have the manure, we have everything. So even with 15% of the population, we can continue to produce surplus agriculture. But of course, these people should be positively placed in different locations. That is where you find, for example, in the Western countries, not more than 5 to 6% are involved in agriculture, but yet they export agricultural products after using for their own purposes. My point is that we live in a highly developing world where technology is very powerful, innovation is happening, and robust developments are happening in all these fields. So knowledge is a knowledge society. And in such knowledge society, people should see the role models, how from an ordinary background, from a nothingness, how they evolved. And they were able to develop their system and they were instrumental for this transformation. For example, but for Dr. Swaminathan, we would have continued to be a country dependent on imports, food imports from other countries, and our poverty would not have been reduced so drastically. Similarly, we produce the maximum milk today, and we are able to produce it and export it, but for the services given by Dr. Varghese Kurian. And Dr. Abdul Kalam for himself, how he visualized the space research and the kind of policies he developed and how he committed to ensure that we become a very powerful nation as far as space research and rocket science are concerned. Now, these are people hailing from ordinary background. So the point is that the public policy also requires this kind of momentum, and the changes that are taking place from one area to another, I think, should be properly monitored. So the students should be told that how these policies are formulated, framed, ideas are coming. So these things come from ordinary level, but to frame a policy, you need knowledgeable people. So you need a structure, you need a framework, and you ought to change it and reform it as situation demands. So this is a continuous process, and the conventional bureaucracy may not be able to look at all these things. So I would say that schools and students should be given an opportunity to get training in public science. Public policy is a public science. So the student should be, from the school, should be given an opportunity, say, for example, a village council. You call it Grama Sabhas. So Grama Sabhas, for example, according to the constitution, every Grama Sabha in a ward should meet once in 3 weeks. How many of us have really seen the Grama Sabhas? So the students should be given an opportunity to attend the Grama Sabha and see how the Grama Sabha discussions are taking place, how agenda is being placed, how voting is taken place. So each of these initial steps have to be properly understood by the student. He grasps a lot of things, and when he comes back, he is motivated. So just like classroom training, our problem with classroom training, we are giving theoretical knowledge, and we use smart board and classroom, whiteboard and blackboard, etc. Fine, these things are right, all right. But when it touches the reality, how it is exposed in the field. So the student should discuss with the farmer, he should with the agricultural labor, he should interact with a, say for example, a tea leaves plucker. So ordinary people have to be discussed, and their knowledge and training should be brought back to the student, to the society. So this should start from a lower level And that kind of training will enable the student to get a training of what is called field work and survey and research. So public science actually, public policy is a public science, and this public science is under evolution. There is no end to public policy study. It changes from one side to another. New issues are coming. Say, for example, terrorism is coming, new crimes are coming, drug abuse is happening. So many new problems are happening. So whenever these areas, the conventional role of a policeman is different. Ordinary role is different. And new challenges and new problems are happening. So hacking is now taking place. Why is hacking taking? How we can overcome? So exposure to the contemporary developments, and particularly the manner in which the world is changing so fast. Say, for example, technology is a great leveler. We have to understand that irrespective of the form of government, let it be monarchy, let it be sultanate, let it be aristocracy or democracy, ultimately, thanks to the information and communication technology, growth of social media and multimedia, whatever happens in one part of the world is immediately communicated down. So it doesn't mean that a dictatorship has no progress. Look at Gulf countries. They are all under sultanates or under empire system, but they do have significant economic progress. And they are doing it with wonderful technology. So technology, mass media, and other kinds of progress can happen, and it is a great leveler. So income distribution, you mentioned about inclusion. These things can be told. So irrespective of even the structure of the government, irrespective of the party in power, there can be levels of inclusion, levels of egalitarianism, and these things are to be properly comprehended, because unlike in the past, wealth cannot be controlled by a few sections of the society. Wealth is to be distributed. And how wealth is distributed, how strong your health is, and how efficient the society is moving, it all depends upon how you understood the society. Society is understood from ordinary level in the empirical level. It can be understood through education. It can be understood through market. It can be understood through political process. So there are multiple levels of understanding the society. But your exposure to that, even from a school level, is important. So give the child an opportunity to understand the society. Say, for example, let him visit the market. Let him visit the polling stations. So let him visit the hospitals. So this kind of field work and exposure will motivate him, and ultimately when he becomes a champion, and that is how, for example, he is motivated by people like Dr. Abdul Kalam or Dr. Swaminathan or Varghese Kurian, and so many people who changed India in the near future. Such role models will emerge even in the days to come. I'm sure that India has a bright future, but we need to come out of the conventional shells. And that is where I think government, political leadership, ministers, even legislators, and also coming to the part of the bureaucrats, they should be completely trained. I will conclude with giving one or two small examples. While in Trivandrum, I was heading the Institute of Parliamentary Affairs. We were given a mandate to give training to the MLAs of Kerala. So I hired very good experts to give them classes for a week on areas like federalism, environment, even digital technology. So I had brilliant experts were brought in to give them training. And the classes were arranged close to the MLA house or the MLA hostel. So it is not far off, it is part of them only. They need to walk only 1 minute to reach that place. So on those days when assemblies were not in session, classes were happening. But our experience was very disappointing. Hardly 15% of the total MLAs turned up. And even those 15% who turned up were not attending the classes regularly. Excellent classes on, say, for example, river disputes, water disputes, and problems of forest encroachment. So many new issues and new policies are given. Training by such experts, these people were looking at their cell phones, quickly walking out to receive a phone call, and then again going and coming back. In other words, they were not concentrating on these classes. So this is a real problem. Our MLAs feel that they need to look only at the next election. And therefore, they're concerned only with the voters and the people, how to ensure the maximum votes for them. For which the communication is important. field work for them. Inauguration is important. Attending to the public grievances is important. Collecting petitions is fine. All these things are good. But are you informed? Are you exposed? Do you have the knowledge of interstate disputes? What is your knowledge about water dispute? Nothing. So public policy training is important. And that is why I said, I remember this experience, hardly 15% of the 140 MLAs attended this workshop. So we were a bit disappointed. We told the minister also, this was the response. So I think we have in Parliament, for example, in the Lok Sabha Secretariat, Bureau of Parliamentary Studies and Training. So, and in state also you have the training program. But there the public policy experts should be hired and their exposure should be communicated and training them. And this will give more opportunity for MLAs and MPs to perform. You must have already noted in every house, Lok Sabha, or in every house in state Vidhan Sabha, there are few MLAs and MPs doing excellent work. Why? Because they have done their homework. And it is here the importance of public policies. Have you done the homework? You ask the MLA, you ask the MP, you ask even the bureaucrat also, because bureaucrat is not a jack of all trades. He also needs training. So this kind of consequent work and continuous training and that exposure will help quality improvement. And this is what the Western countries have successfully achieved. I conclude with one more example. I was offering a course on decentralization in one of the American universities called Claremont Graduate Universities, with giving training with special focus on Kerala, how we have advanced so much in the field of decentralization. I found among the students some senior people sitting there. So I asked them, what is your background? And they were representatives of the city council. In other words, they are members of the elected members of the village council, city council members. I asked them, why did you join this course? They said, yes, here, like everywhere, any course you need fees. It is not free courses. Fees are there. But despite that, we thought that the courses that given by foreign faculty will be useful to us so that we can take the benefit of such courses and see whether some of them can be implemented at our level also. So this is interdependency. So they have come to learn something from India, something from Kerala, and they are members of the village council or the city council. So knowledge is something to be shared. And it is not a monopoly of the West. It is not a monopoly of the East also. So let us share this experience. And that is where I think policy awareness becomes extremely significant. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So my inbox is full with a lot of questions. I have nearly 8 questions. So we'll try to briefly answer them because we are also running short of time. So I'll try to club some questions because there's some questions on public policy and its role in mental health education in India. Divya Kashyap and Pragya Singh have asked this question. Uh, I would also like to kind of connect it to this thing on the affordability of higher education. So probably if you could,
Adaptability, affordability of
affordability of higher education and policy education
yeah,
actually.
yeah.
So if we could kind of connect policy education, the affordability and mental health together.
Yeah, very relevant. I think the questions are relevant because they have connected very much with the policies, public policies of today. Coming first to the higher education and affordability, I will take that first. See, now India, we are in a way in a complex situation as far as educational growth of this country is concerned. Why? Because as all of you know very well, 52% of the population are young. They are below 26 years of age. Everybody knows that. But in quantitative terms, they are so huge. Consider 144 crores divided by 52%. So it comes so huge that more than 72 crores of people or 720 million people are hungry for education. They're really hungry for education. So this question about higher education is also significant because in India now, why I said we are in a complex situation. Can we consider education as a completely social good? Is it a social good or is it a commodity? I'm repeating that. Education as a social good or as a commodity? So that question comes very significant because It is both. My answer is that education is intended to be a very important medium for public good. Without education, there is no future, and it is a pilgrimage for your life and your advancement. And definitely, education is a great leveler. But the problem is also there. Education requires infrastructure, education requires quality education requires proper training and updation, buildings, etc. So the state is unable to provide education to all the 720 million people now waiting for education. So what happened? Private sector has come. Now we have private universities. Very soon we will have private foreign universities. So education is becoming not only complex but competitive. So how do you formulate a policy here? So you cannot formulate a policy exclusively, but rather look at the situation and say how education can be made an inclusive one. Can we ensure for primary education 100% free? The Constitution itself has recommended. And also it has now been shifted to fundamental rights. Free and fair education up to the age of 14 is compulsory now. So are the state in a position to provide free education? So what kind of public policy you will provide for primary education? What kind of education or policy you will frame for higher education? So this dilemma is very crucial. And therefore, the answer to this question is that we need separate public policies as far as higher education is concerned, because higher education, again, another important dilemma is that it is quantitatively very high. We are the second biggest higher education landscape in the world after China. China number one, India number two, United States third. Despite having a lot of foreign students, America is only third. India has the second largest educational landscape. So we need special policies. We need separate policies that will facilitate benefit for the student. Say, for example, a policy that is useful in Sikkim may not be useful in West Bengal. A policy that is useful in West Bengal may not be applicable in Maharashtra. And we are a constitutional democracy with a federal structure. The languages are different. So we have to be very careful in drafting public policy. Little bit of flexibility is important. Interdisciplinarity is important. So these factors have to be taken into consideration. Coming quickly to your first question raised by a student on health and mental health. You are very right. COVID was a game changer in a way. And after the COVID pandemic, a lot of problems are catching up. Even before that also, mental health became very important. So India need to strengthen its public health scenario. As of now, our GDP share in health sector is very weak. It's not even 3%, it's less than 2%. So we need more money for investing for health education and health development. And healthcare development is very important. And coming to the mental health also, you are right. For example, now the country faces problem, even at the student level. UGC insists that there must be a student counselor in the campus. There has to be a psychologically knowledgeable person available in the campus, because students face so many kinds of stress. They face stress from their curriculum. They face stress from their assignment and work given by their teachers. They face stress from the peer group in the classes. They face stress in the form of ranking. So a lot of problems. So mental health issue and the campus is also very problematic. Of course, at the broader level in the society also, this is very important. And some of the studies have shown when we conducted election surveys, I remember even in Kerala, more than 3% of our sample had mental health problems. So that we consider very important, because if 3% of the small sample has mental health problems who cannot be interviewed properly, that explains that we have issues. So the society under stress. So how to develop public policies in connection with all these, I think those factors are to be taken into consideration. You need public policies that suits the college atmosphere, that suits the regional atmosphere, the ecosystem. So, and also aging is also another important factor. Mental health problems affect the aging people, the senior citizens. India is also, although we call it a demographic dividend society, in another 30 years, aging will start in our country, which means as of now, our lifespan is around 71. But in the years to come, it will go up to 80 in another 10, 15 years. So as aging happens, what will happen? There will be problems for the senior people in regard to their health, in regard to their income, in regard to their comfort, in regard to their social security, in housing. Lot of problems will come. So mental health is not a problem affecting the child only. It affects everybody, even the income earner, the income earner in the family, in the senior people. And earlier we had large families, we had joint families. Now with changing times, nuclear families are catching up. So the situation is changing. So in the years to come, if families have only 2 people or 3 people settled in an apartment, where will the older people live? This is a big issue in the Western countries. As you had seen, they have set up social security homes managed efficiently by the civil society and the government. I have visited some of them in the West, and they have wonderful atmosphere there. And the older people are given enough time for reading, for entertainment, for education, or for listening to certain news, or even traveling, depending upon their health. So they also need some comfort and happiness. So this is very important. And for industrial society, they already face this problem. By another 30 years or 40 years, India will also face this problem. So mental health education is also important. So public policy should also look at all these dimensions. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, sir. I have a couple of more questions, but the time doesn't permit us to continue. However, you have given us a lot to think about. Not just me, also my students who are listening. They're eager to ask a lot more of questions from you. That tells me that I should have you again here.
Yeah.
But
I will come either online or offline.
yes, sir.
Definitely. I know
So
the
thank you
process.
so much, because the insights that you have shared, the kind of examples that you have provided to us from your personal experience working in the governance sector to running a whole university, and also being a policy education legend. And I am just so thankful to you, so grateful to you for gracing all of us with your presence here. So, on behalf of IILM University, the faculty, staff, and my wonderful students, thank you so much. We truly appreciate your time and
Thank
your
you very much.
expertise.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Please convey my greetings to the students. And
Yes.
also, I'm very happy that a discussion on public policy could be initiated here. And I hope
Yes.
students will do very well in their life. And of course, they have a great future and they have to work in tune with the developments that are happening. I wish them all the best. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Aswani,
you.
and thank you
Thank you,
all.
sir.
Bye.